Okay, so welcome everyone. This is Shilpa here, and today I have the honor of speaking with Dr. Kumar Dhawale. He is a devoted missionary of homeopathy, and he is somebody who is carrying his father's remarkable legacy. Now, Dr. Kumar, he's the founder of the prestigious Dr. M.L. Dhawale Trust and Institute. It's a center renowned for its unwavering commitment to patient care, to education, and research. Now, Dr. Dhawale, he wears many hats. He's a psychiatrist, he's an educator, he's a visionary. He has an extraordinary gift for, identifying and nurturing exceptional talent among, everyday practitioners. And under his leadership, this trust has now grown into a national hub in India of excellent pioneering work in community health, in postgraduate education, clinical research, and Dr. Dhawale has served on the board of governors of Central Council of Homeopathy in New Delhi. He has contributed to several key committees over the years of the Central Council for Research in Homeopathy. His editorial work with the ICR publication, it continues to educate and inspire homeopaths worldwide. Now, when I first connected with Dr. Dhawale, it was when I invited him to speak at my Academy's Global Homeopathic Summit in 2024. And following that, his team, warmly welcomed me to visit the Trust Hospital and the research centers in Palghar and Bhopoli. And I don't know, I was deeply moved by just the grassroots level work being done in the tribal communities around Palghar. And I thought it was a living example of homeopathy as social medicine. So since then, we've been in touch. We've been working together on several projects, including his upcoming course on homeopathy and psychology. And, today's conversation is something really special. Just a week ago, Dr. Kumar, he invited me to attend the launch of his father's long awaited second volume, which is a sequel to the Seminal Principles and Practice of Homeopathy, Volume 1, right? So that first volume, it had sort of a profound influence on my own personal journey in homeopathy. So much so that, when I was designing the curriculum for Nature Care College in Australia, back in 2007, I had to make it like a recommended required reading for students. Now, seeing the birth of volume 2 in those, videos on advancing frontiers, it's just drawn me closer to the spirit behind the work. It just made me want to know more about the man behind this work, which is Dr. M.L. Dhawale. And today, we are here not just to discuss homeopathy or the institution's achievements, we are here to connect the personal with the professional. So, to explore a son's memories of his father's vision and the enduring legacy that continues to shape generations. So, we are going to reflect on how we as a community of learners and practitioners can take away from this, deepen our understanding of homeopathy as well. Welcome, Dr. Kumar. Truly a pleasure to connect with you once again.
Thank you, Shilpa, for this long introduction
I couldn't.
and opportunity to
I,
connect.
I couldn't really put everything together. I mean, it's 3 generations, right?
Thank you.
So let me start from the very beginning, sir. Take us back to your earliest memories, of your father. Not like a homeopath, but what he was at home and what was he like?
Uh, all who have seen him know him as a very large built person. He was very muscular
Well,
and very bony in his structure. And so the earliest memories that I have of him is a very powerful figure. And he had a very, I would say, a very measured way of communicating, of speaking. So as children, we were naturally in those days, it was not very easy to become very friendly with the male figure. But definitely there was an aura of awe with which we regarded him. And that continued till the time that we crossed over into our adolescence. And it is then that we really came to know him as an individual, as a person, as a friend. And it is at that time that we realized that we could really, really talk to him on all matters that were bothering us. And well, for me, it was lucky that I was in the medical profession as a medical student. So there was a lot of close interests that held us together. But otherwise, also in the case of my sister and my younger brother, who were not in medicine at all, but he was very, very approachable, extremely approachable, extremely friendly. And with his contacts and with his networking, he was a great support to my sister who was in the management field and also to my younger brother. So overall, though the world looked upon him as a very distant and a very strict educationist and clinician, for us, he was a very friendly soul, a very approachable person.
Wow. So when was something, any particular moment in your youth that you realized that your father's work was something more than just a profession? When did you realize that he was sort of, creating a legacy?
It was a gradually growing realization right from the time that I joined medical college. And a lot of times, many teachers who were teaching me in allopathic college, we had a surgeon and we had a physician. And all of them, when they came to know that I was my father's son, all of them treated me differently.
Okay.
And it is then that I came to know that my father was regarded in as a very high regard, even though he was a homeopath. He was an MD from my college, but he had separated away from allopathic practice right since the time that he passed out. That was in 1952.
Right.
And trained in almost 1977, 78. So it was a very long time. But all my teachers, they regarded him with great respect. So he was a very well-known figure as a medical person in the homeopathic field as well as in the allopathic. So that was one thing that really very, in a very sharp way, it struck me that he had a standing far beyond what commonly a homeopath enjoys in that time of Indian society. And there was a time when he was addressing an conference in Delhi. It was a conference which was convened by the Ministry of Family Health and Welfare. And he was to speak on a topic in how we can take health to the community. And it is there that I came to realize that even all over the country, his views and his thoughts were well regarded. And eventually, the type of presentation that he gave in the audience there was finally published. And it is now sort of, he was speaking of establishing a health university at the district level.
Okay.
And which university would then cater not only to education, but to also health research, to community activities. So it was something that was truly revolutionary at that time. And I'm talking about 1978. And I was a member of the audience. And I knew the way in which the participants were responding to what he spoke. It was truly something that I really value even today. So I feel that the type of vision that he was portraying, even at that time, even at that place, for a person who was coming from the homeopathic field, was truly extraordinary.
Wow. So, Dr. Kumar, what did you take away from, looking at your father? He shifted from conventional medical background into homeopathy. Was there any sort of thing that you took on, or was it communicated directly? How did you change your, paradigm towards the approach to
Uh,
homeopathy?
Dr. Shilpa, this has been a question that has been asked to me so many times. And it is not very well known that my father also never practiced allopathy, apart
Right.
from when he was in the hospital.
Right from the beginning.
Yeah, right from the beginning. His father, Dr. L.D. Dhawale, he was a trained allopath and he converted to homeopathy. So he was the first member of our family who was medically trained and who switched over from allopathy to homeopathy. And there is a story behind it that he was a teacher in my college where I studied, my grandfather. And a lot of his colleagues complained to the dean saying that Dr. L.D. Dhawale was prescribing homeopathy. And when he was an allopathic teacher, and I'm talking about this in the 1940s. And so the dean, who was a very strong allopathic practitioner, he summoned him into his cabin and he asked as to these are the complaints. So what do you have to say to defend yourself? And surprisingly, Dr. L.D. Dhawale, my grandfather, told the dean that, look, I'm here in two capacities. One as a teacher and the other as a physician. And as a teacher, it is my duty to teach my students what is there currently in the medical science and where medical science has no answer to some of the medical questions that the patients come to us. So the moment I have realized and I have taught them that the therapeutics of the day do not have any answer to this problem of the patient, then I am free because I have taught them all that I know. Now my duty starts towards the patient. And so whatever I know of the healing science, I will impart to my patients. And so therefore, he used to prescribe homeopathy in the wards at the KM hospital in Mumbai. And probably it was the first such instance that in an allopathic institution, a consultant was prescribing homeopathy. And when my father was a medical student, he had a bad attack of appendicitis. And my grandfather treated him. He gave him bryonia. And by the time the surgeon who was called in by my grandfather, he came and he saw my father, he was surprised. He said that, look, he told my grandfather, I respect your clinical acumen, But if I was to see this patient, I would hesitate in diagnosing appendicitis. Then he took him up on the operation table and he found that this was a appendix which had ruptured, but the abscess was well contained and my father had narrowly escaped peritonitis. So that was the effect of the homeopathic medicine prescribed, which even fooled the best surgeon of the day that there is no appendicitis. And I think that that was the singular instance which made my father decide, as a medical student, that he will no longer practice allopathy, he will learn allopathy, but he will practice homeopathy. So that is how he became a homeopath.
Right from the beginning.
And that is how I also, when I joined, I also had decided that I will learn clinical science because that was something which was very important. And then I will also join homeopathy. So I too have never really prescribed allopathy after I have passed out my MD.
Wow. So where did you, now there are three generations, right? And each one have first become a conventional doctor, graduated as a conventional doctor, but two of them have directly started working with homeopathy right from day one. So did you actually learn from your father directly?
Oh yes, of course. Yeah, because as a medical student, there was no time that we had. We were on
Correct.
full. As an intern, we had some evenings off. And so in the evenings, I would be with my father and in his consulting chamber. And right from all the nitty gritties that one would do, like preparing medicines, prescribing medicines, examining patients, physical examination, taking the blood pressure, etc., etc. Right from there to observing his case taking, his communication, his dealing with patients. So I was totally with him right from the time that I was almost a medical doctor. And then in my post graduation, also, while I was doing my psychological medicine, whenever I used to get time, I would definitely attend the courses that he would run. And my teachers in psychiatry, they were also aware that I was going to be practicing homeopathy even after I passed out. And they were quite supportive about it. And in fact, on a couple of occasions, my teacher had asked me to give a talk on homeopathy in our postgraduate teaching rounds, so that they felt that all the to-be psychiatrists must try to understand what homeopathy has to bring to the practice of good medicine. So I think that was the openness with which they greeted whatever homeopathy we were practicing.
What is very unique about this process is a lot of conventional doctors, they use homeopathy in what, people here call as green allopathy, right? So they basically use it like therapeutics and they use it this for that sort of a way into their practice. But what was profound about you and your father is, and when I was reading Principles and Practice as a medical student, in my, I think, fourth year of homeopathy, it completely changed the way I understood miasms. Now, that is the core. It was, the simplicity of the cases, the clarity of, the approach, the way homeopathy can be structured and systematized. It was wonderful. But just the miasms and the reading symposium and grasping the art of repertorization and such a structured, logical way, it really appealed to me. So that was, I think, such a core there, which is fundamentally, I do not see much in conventional doctors who understand homeopathy at that level. So when you sent me that link for the launch of Volume 2 and Advancing Frontiers, I was so thrilled because I had no idea there was something more to come from your father's work. I thought it was done. So tell us the story behind Volume 2. When did your father start writing it? What was his intention?
See, before that, Shilpa, since you spoke about the part one, and you said that it has impacted you so very deeply, let me give you a little background of part one.
Okay.
Actually, part one was in the making for a pretty long time, and you will be surprised. It was in the making for almost 30 years.
Right. Okay.
And the origin of part one was in the lecture series which my grandfather started as a teacher who was teaching a lot of students, sometimes his colleagues, allopaths, a lot of lay people who were interested in learning homeopathy at that time in
Right.
Mumbai, in Bombay. There were a lot of people who were interested in that. And so there used to be an annual lecture series which my grandfather used to run. And it was a very structured series. And it was a series which was originated and which was planned by him based on his training as a medical person who had switched over to homeopathy. So you realize that there was a very strong clinical base to the way in which he was teaching homeopathy. And so when my father took over, when he passed out, and sometimes in 52, 53, he revamped the series. Because by that time, a lot of medical progress was achieved. A lot of significant progress in pathology, in pathophysiology, in the origin of disease. So, what my father was able to do was to bring modern concepts, modern clinical concepts, modern clinical pathological correlation, the concepts, into the teaching of homeopathy. So, if you are able to see, it is a very unique work. Because if you see the way in which the book progresses, the 20 odd chapters of which the book is, and the main aspects of that book, I would say, are twofold. One, it integrates a lot of approaches from different homeopaths, right? Starting from Hahnemann to Boninghosen to Kent to Boger. All of those are integrated into the chapter, if you can recall, the conceptual image in homeopathic practice. So that is one important hallmark of that book. And the other important hallmark which you referred to is the miasms. And in the miasms, what he has done is again very revolutionary. What he has done is that he has looked at susceptibility, which Stuart Close spoke about, which Robert spoke about. He has looked at susceptibility. He has integrated clinical sciences to susceptibility. And he has worked out the theory of miasms based on that concept. So to that extent, he was going across or apart from Hahnemann, beyond Hahnemann, because from Hahnemann's time to the time that we are now talking about, clinical science has changed, pathology has changed. And so therefore, as clinicians, we also must remain abreast. So this is where we end part one.
Correct.
When we go to part two, and the question that you asked, what went on between the time that he finished part one, which was around 65, 66, to when he penned Advancing Frontiers, that is around 85, 86. So what has happened in that time was that his touch with practice of medicine, practice of homeopathy was vast. He 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 had a astonishing area of practice, lot of pathology, lot of psychiatric elements he was able to see. And what also he was able to see was a lot of students who were struggling with understanding homeopathy as a clinical science. And so through the time that he established his teaching, small group teaching, that was around 1970, to the next 15, 16 years, he did a lot of thinking, reflecting, and experimenting on how a homeopath ought to be trained. So if the part one, that is the principles and practice, brings a homeopath to a level where he is able to grasp the fundamentals of the science, what he now needs to understand is the fundamentals of the practice. So the philosophy and the practice. So what he does in part two is trying to elaborate how the practice of homeopathy needs to be imbibed by any student, any practitioner, any consultant. So part two extends from the basic steps of how we approach a patient, right, to how we are able to record, how we are able to process data, how we are able to manage practice. And the most important is how we are able to teach homeopaths to learn homeopathy and to practice good, quality, conscious homeopathy. So part two has a lot of element of the actual operational aspects of homeopathy.
So this is fascinating because I don't know of any book which actually talk about how you actually operate a practice. Because there is something where you learn, and that's theory, and then there's something where you apply and actually become a successful practitioner. And that is really interesting. So, when I read, I was looking at your interviews and all the clips about making the book. And there was this one thing that really stuck with me, that you were sort of, it took a long time. Your father left the work, and then for you to take on. And somewhere something must be going on in your mind all these years. Tell us about what was going on in your mind. What was the delay about? What was the confusion? What was the difficulty in that choice?
Oh, that's a good question. When my father wrote the Advancing Frontiers, it was not like what he wrote the part one, Principles of Practice. The Advancing Frontiers is a book which contains the very essence of what he had learned in his wide practice, in his wide education, and in his wide research. So what he has done is he has put things in a very brief way, very succinct way. If I am to look at what he wrote, it is like, what Dr. Hahnemann wrote in terms of the aphorisms.
Right.
And if there are no notes, if there are no footnotes to the organon, one would be very much at sea trying to understand what Hahnemann's mind was when he wrote the book. So similarly, Advancing Frontiers, when he left it to us, he left it to us saying that just add the cases, because as you see in part one, cases are a big pillar.
Big part of it.
It supports the concepts which part one gives. So all that he said was just add the cases and you will be able to publish the book. So we precisely tried to do that. So as a group, we came together, we identified the cases and all that, and we tried to elaborate on it. But what really held us back was that the writing which Dr. M.L. Dhawale was doing was something which would have not really gone, being consumer friendly. It would not have really got across the way in which he would have liked to. So we finally, after a lot of struggle, we decided that in spite of the uh, directions that he had given us, we needed to re-look at the text. We needed to understand whether today's consumer, and as we know that today's type of student is very different from what it was even when you were a student in Mumbai. Attention spans are less. The type of help that students require is much more. So we felt that overall, we would need to relook at the text in the light of today's demands, and we needed to sort of re-expand it to a great extent. And then also add appropriate cases in each chapter so that we are able to give a strong support to whatever concepts and ideas that were part of the advancing frontiers. So that took a long time. And then we were just coming into the golden jubilee of the Institute of Clinical Research. And we felt that this is the right time for us to release the book. And that is how it was a superhuman effort on the part of our team to be able to once again, start this work and not stop till the goal has been reached. And that is how we have been able to complete this book in a very, very short period.
That's amazing. I mean, it would have not been possible for anyone else to really interpret and put it out in the way, because it has been distilled into you, and that was why it was such an important milestone, I would say. So just for people who have never seen the book yet, it is still, I think the publication date is tomorrow. Is that right?
Yeah,
So
the public.
10th May. So tell us about, in a nutshell, I know it's hard. What do you think your father would want the new generation of homeopaths to take away from this book? What do you say?
So, what he was very much interested in trying to impart to the incoming generation was that homeopathy is a scientific discipline and
Mm.
it has to be practiced in a systematic. And one of his great discoveries was the standardized case record, the SCR, what we have called in the book SCR. SCR is almost 100-page booklet. You must
Booklet.
have seen.
I've seen
You
it.
must, and it has a section which is a recording section and a section which is a processing section. So the entire part two is based on how we are able to understand this scientific work of a standardized clinical case record, how we are able to use it in all its features, and what benefit it and the entire training system, which is a part of what he was working on through his last 20 years, how a homeopath can master that. So,
Mm.
what he does in the part two is to take the student on a journey right from the chapter one where he encounters a patient. What is this encounter? What is this clinical interview. What is this clinical investigation? So he bases all his thoughts on how clinical investigation launches the homeopath and the patient on a journey, and how that journey then goes on in the subsequent chapters, where the second chapter is dealing with the way in which this data that we get from chapter 1, how that data is processed, how that data undergoes vast changes, and how at every stage scientific principles which are written in the organon, which have been enunciated by all the masters, homeopathic masters, how we are able to apply those rules and laws, and how we are able to establish the correspondence in the material medical. The second part deals with all those processes. It takes you step by step. And the unique part of this book is that he learned quite a lot from his 30-40 years. He read quite a lot. And as one of the reviewers of the Advancing Frontiers has said, that rarely has a homeopath been able to put together so many streams of thought, so many streams of philosophy, so many streams of educational principles and practice. So it is a vast, I would say, a journey which any homeopath can go through by looking at how we are as homeopaths. Hahnemann has said a homeopath should know all what a man of culture should know. And the second chapter gives a really bird's eye view of what that is. And the subsequent chapters, it is taking the student on the journey that after you prescribe, okay, how prescription coming to a medicine is only a part. But as Kent has said, there are so many homeopaths who find the medicine, but they don't know how to use it. So the potency, the repetition, the use of the intercurrent, the use of the phase medicine. So then he enters on the third, fourth chapter into all aspects of the regulation of the homeopathic practice, the management of homeopathic practice. And the fifth chapter is a very interesting chapter. And that is something that all of us go through. We do all the best that we can, but we don't get results. Now what do we do? So the fifth chapter is giving an idea of how we review our own actions. And having reviewed how we learn from our mistakes, how we rectify the mistakes. And having rectified the mistakes, how we are again able to implement it. And on implementation, how we are able to then see the results. So the journey of the fifth chapter is from failure to success. So these 5 chapters are remarkable chapters which are actually written for the training of a homeopath. So an homeopath can be anybody. He can be a newly educated person. He can be a postgraduate. He can be a teacher. He can be a researcher. So any quality or any level of homeopathic practitioner can really learn from this book, because these insights are some things which I don't think the homeopathic world has been exposed to as far as I know. And the 6th chapter is a special chapter, because the 6th chapter is giving, in a nutshell, what type of education and training a homeopath should be subjected to so that he can gain an excellence in the quality of his practice. Because we learn, we see patients. But what do we learn? Say, I see 10 patients of anxiety, I see 10 patients of hypertension. But what do I learn from these 10 patients, which I can practice on the 11th? And how it is possible then to engage in a exercise of accumulation of knowledge, and how I can then generalize that into other experiences. So the sixth chapter is very, very special because it addresses a lot of aspects of education and training of a homeopathy.
That's fascinating. So that is, level, it's like an insect to you, to the bird's eye view, and then zooming in and zooming out. So if there is a new practitioner, just out of college or just um, today's generation, and they were to pick advancing frontiers, what would be the sections that might challenge them? And what would be the sections that you think would most inspire them that they've never learned before?
I think the first chapter, because all of us are exposed to patients. All of us learn from patients. But the first chapter is special because it gives you a lot of hints on how it is possible to learn more and to practice and impart a lot of learning to others from that.
Mm-hmm.
So the first chapter is something that will teach a new practitioner a lot. And in that, we have, in fact, given a live interview of how an interview runs and how it is possible to learn from every stage of the interview. How it is possible to understand what the patient is going through, what the physician conflict the physician is going through, and how an observer, because the concept of an observer is something which is very important in the chapter 1. And Dr. Hanneman has spoken of the medical observer. So this is an actual way in which the medical observer is given a particular status, a particular standing, and he is made to participate, become a non-participant observer. That is something that all educational practice, today's educational practice, gives a lot of weight.
True.
So I think a lot of practitioners at different levels of their practice, of their evolution, are likely to learn different things from this book. And the same person, after going through the book, once again will learn something more. So, that is so in all aphoristic work. More you read, the more experience you have had, the more reflection you have had, the more you glean from whatever you read.
Wonderful, sir. That is so amazing. And, I can't wait. So, for people around the world who want to get this book, tell us about it.
Yeah, we are. The book is going to be published tomorrow, and we will be definitely giving our on our website, MLD Trust website, www.mldtrust.org. We will be having all the details of the book and how to acquire it. We are bringing it out in 2 editions, the deluxe edition and the regular edition.
Mm-hmm.
And the special aspect of the deluxe edition is that we are including some aspects of the original manuscript of Dr. M.L. Dhawale, how he used to write in Advancing Frontiers, and what it is possible to learn from the manner in which he used to write. So there are some inclusions of his original work and the comments on it. So I think that it's a very special edition that we are bringing out.
Wonderful, sir. Thank you so much for your time. And any parting words before we go, because this was heartening to really know.
I think that part one and part two make a package. And when you mention about a student entering advancing frontiers, he must enter through the portal of part
The
one.
first volume.
Part one is something that really lays down the base, the ground, and which allows you to access part two in a much easier fashion.
Got you. No worries. Thank you so much, sir. And it has been a delight and a pleasure always to talk with you. But thank you very much for your time.
Bye bye. Thank you.
Bye for now.